They said I was just a babysitter. "She's lucky we let her help," my son said to his wife. They didn't know I was the reason they could afford daycare last year. And this year, the trust I quietly set up for their child just got redirected. Chimpto. Name is Carol. For the past 2 years, since my granddaughter Lily was born, my world has been measured in small, perfect increments. The weight of her sleeping head on my shoulder, the delightful chaos of her first finger painting session, the sweet, milky scent of her hair after a bath. After my husband David passed away, leaving behind a silence that was both vast and deafening, Lily's arrival felt like the return of light and sound to my universe. I loved her with a ferocity that was all-encompassing. A grandmother's. Love that is pure, uncut joy, free from the daily anxieties of parenthood. My son Mark and his wife Jessica are good people, I've always told myself. They are just products of their time. Driven, career-focused, perpetually stressed about finances, and caught in the relentless current of modern life. They both work demanding jobs, so when Lily was born, it seemed the most natural thing in the world for me to step in. 3 days, a week, every week, I would drive the 45 minutes to their suburban home to care for her. I never thought of it as a job or a duty. It was a privilege. I was an active, integral part of my granddaughter's life, teaching her nursery rhymes, taking her to the park, building block towers that she would gleefully destroy. This time with her was the scaffolding that held up my new solitary life. I knew things were tight for them financially. David, my late husband, had been a shrewd and quiet investor, leaving me more than comfortable, a fact I never broadcasted. I lived simply in the same modest home we'd shared for 40 years. I saw no need to advertise my financial security. It felt unseemly. But about a year ago, I could sense a new level of panic in Mark's voice. He'd lost a major client, and the freelance consulting work he did was drying up. Jessica's salary alone wasn't enough to cover their mortgage and the mounting bills. I overheard a hushed, frantic phone call she had, mentioning the possibility of having to sell their house, Lily's home. The thought of my granddaughter's life being upended by their financial struggles was unbearable. But I knew their pride, especially Mark's, would never allow them to accept a direct handout from me. It would have shifted our dynamic in a way that would have made him resentful and me uncomfortable. So, like so many mothers before me, I resorted to a loving deception. I contacted my lawyer, the same man who had handled David's estate, and we devised a plan. Through a series of discreet inquiries, he found the name of the parent company of the firm that had recently let Mark EM go. A few weeks later, a letter arrived at their house from a shell corporation we had created, bearing a letterhead that looked impressively official. It informed Mark that due to a class action settlement regarding freelance contract disputes, a completely fabricated event, he was entitled to a significant one-time payout for past work. The amount was precisely what I had calculated they would need to clear their immediate debts and get back on their feet. I'll never forget the phone call I received from Mark that evening. He was ecstatic, breathless with relief. "Mom, you're not going to believe the luck we've had," he'd exclaimed. "It's a miracle. All that hard work I put in finally paid off." I felt a pang of guilt at the deception, but it was drowned out by the immense relief of knowing Lily's home was safe. They had their pride, and I had my peace of mind. They celebrated with a fancy dinner out, never suspecting that the miracle was funded by the woman they believed was living on a modest widow's pension. With their immediate finances secure, my thoughts turned to the more distant future. Lily's. I wanted to give her what David and I had always prioritized: freedom. The freedom to choose her path without the crushing weight of student debt, the freedom to travel, to start a business, to buy her first home. I returned to my lawyer's office and instructed him to set up an irrevocable educational trust in Lily's name. I seeded it with a substantial sum, an amount that, with careful investment over the next 2 decades, would grow into a life-changing nest egg for her. The process filled me with a quiet, profound joy. I would sit in the evenings, picturing Lily, at 18, opening a letter from the trust and understanding, for the first time, the depth of her grandfather's love and foresight, and my own. It was a secret gift, a final act of love that would ripple through her entire life. This trust was my most precious secret, the ultimate expression of my devotion. It was a Tuesday afternoon last month when the world shifted on its axis. I was at their house, as usual. Lily, exhausted after a long afternoon at the park, had fallen asleep in my arms on the rocking chair in her nursery. I carried her carefully to her crib, tucked her in, and turned on the baby monitor, leaving her door slightly ajar. I went downstairs to quietly tidy the kitchen. The soft hum of the monitor on the counter, my only company. That's when I heard their voices, soft but clear, coming from the living room. They must have thought I had gone out to the garden. I'm just so exhausted, Jessica said with a heavy sigh. This week has been brutal at work. I feel like I'm running on empty. I know, honey, Mark's voice replied soothingly. We'll get through it. At least we have my mom handling Lily 3 days a week. It's a huge help. It is, Jessica conceded. But sometimes, I don't know, she has her own way of doing things. I came home yesterday and she'd rearranged all the books on Lily's shelf. She acts less like she's helping and more like she's a third parent, not just the babysitter. Just the babysitter? The phrase landed like a stone in my gut. It was Mark's reply, however, that shattered me. Look, I get it, he said, his voice dropping into a conspiratorial tone. But don't act like we're putting her out. She's lonely. She's got nothing else to do since Dad died. Honestly, she's lucky we let her help. It gives her a sense of purpose. We're doing her a favor as much as she's doing one for us. Lucky we let her help. I stood frozen in the kitchen, my hand gripping the edge of the counter so hard my knuckles turned white. The humming of the baby monitor seemed to amplify his words, drilling them directly into my soul. Lucky? A favor. Just the babysitter. In that single devastating moment, my entire relationship with my son, my entire role in their lives, was recast in a harsh, ugly light. The love I poured into my granddaughter, the time I so freely gave, the secret, life-altering. Financial support I had provided, none of it was seen. In its place was their perception of a lonely old woman, a pathetic creature who should be grateful for the scraps of purpose they threw her way. They didn't see me as a mother, as a grandmother, as the quiet benefactor who had saved their home. They saw me as a convenience, a utility. I didn't move. I didn't make a sound. I waited until I heard them move to another part of the house. Then, on autopilot, I finished wiping the counters, loaded the dishwasher, and turned off the monitor. I went upstairs, looked in on my beautiful, sleeping granddaughter, and my heart broke. I kissed her soft cheek, my tears falling onto her blanket. Then I gathered my things and left their house, my heart a hollow, aching cavern. The 45-minute drive home was a blur. The casual cruelty of their conversation played over and over in my mind. It wasn't said in anger, it was their truth, spoken freely when they thought I couldn't hear. That's what made it so much worse. I got home and sat in the dark for hours, the paperwork for Lily's newly established trust sitting on the desk beside me. It was a monument to a love they couldn't see and didn't value. The trust was set up with me as the sole trustee, with full power to amend its terms and beneficiaries until my death. It was designed to be my final gift of love to my granddaughter, an extension of the family bond. But what family? The one I thought I had? Or the one that saw me as a lonely babysitter they were doing a favor? A new, cold clarity began to dawn. They had defined our relationship in purely transactional terms. She helps us, and we give her purpose. Very well, a transaction it would be. Love, I realized with a profound and searing sadness, had to be a two-way street. And so did legacy. The trust was an act of familial devotion. But if I was just the hired help, then my financial planning needed to reflect my new, diminished station. I stared at the paperwork, at my beautiful granddaughter's name, and my resolve hardened. The love I had for her would never change. But the form that love would take, the legacy I would leave behind, that was about to be radically, fundamentally, and irrevocably altered. I reached for the phone, not to call my son, but to call my lawyer. It was time to make a new appointment. The drive to my lawyer's office a few days later was surreal. The world outside my car window looked exactly the same. The familiar streets, the budding trees of early spring, but my own internal landscape had been irrevocably altered. The pain of my son's words had subsided from a raw, open wound into a cold, heavy stone in my chest. It wasn't the words themselves that haunted me, but the casual, unthinking truth behind them. They had revealed the foundation of our relationship to be sand, while I had been building my life upon it as if it were granite. I wasn't there to plan a revenge. Revenge is a hot, messy emotion. What I felt was a quiet, chilling clarity. I was there to draft a consequence. My lawyer, a kind, meticulous man named Arthur, who had handled my husband David's will, greeted me with his usual warmth. He ushered me into his quiet, book-lined office. "Carol," he said, smiling. "It's good to see you. I trust you're here to finalize the details for Lily's trust. The paperwork is all ready for your signature." He slid the thick vellum folder across his polished desk. I looked at it, at my granddaughter's name elegantly printed on the cover. Just days ago, the sight of it had filled me with a profound, secret joy. Now, it represented a promise made to a version of my family that I now knew did not exist. "Actually, Arthur," I said, my voice even, "I'm here to make a significant change. I want to dissolve this trust entirely and create a new one. A charitable foundation." His professional smile faltered. He removed his spectacles, a sure sign of his. "Surprise! A foundation?" "Carol, this is a major shift. The trust for Lily secures her entire future. We've been working on it for weeks. May I ask what's brought this on?" I owed him an explanation, at least a partial one. I wouldn't share the sordid details of the overheard conversation. My humiliation was my own to carry. But I could share the principle. "David and I built our savings with the intention of supporting our family," I began, choosing my words with care. "But I've come to believe that the definition of family isn't just about blood. It's about mutual respect, appreciation, and care. It's about seeing a person for who they are, not just for the role they can play in your life." I continued, the words flowing from a place of newfound conviction. "I've realized that my resources could serve a greater purpose. They could honor David's memory in a way that truly reflects the kind of man he was. Generous, community-minded, always. Ready to help those who were overlooked." I laid out my idea. I wanted to create the David M. Foundation for Generational Care. Its mission would be to provide financial grants and support services to grandparents who have taken on the primary role of caring for their grandchildren, often on fixed incomes and with little to no help. I spoke of the invisible army of people, like me, who step into the breach out of love, whose contributions are often taken for granted, who are seen as a convenience rather than the pillars they are. My own story, my own pain, was being channeled into a broader purpose. I would be helping the people who truly were lucky to help, ensuring they had the resources to do so without sacrificing their own security and dignity. Arthur listened intently, his expression shifting from surprise to a deep, compassionate understanding. He saw the resolve in my eyes. He knew this wasn't a whim. We spent the next 2 hours discussing the structure, the charter, the legal framework. I would be the foundation's director for my lifetime, and upon my death, the entirety of my estate, the house, the investments, everything that would have gone to Mark and then Lily would become its endowment, managed by a board I would appoint. It was a complete and total redirection of my legacy. By the time I left his office, the legal wheels were in motion. I felt no triumph, only a quiet, somber sense of rightness. The stone in my chest had been lifted and placed as the cornerstone of something new. The following Tuesday was my next scheduled day to care for Lily. The dread I felt on the drive over was immense. How could I face them, knowing what I knew, carrying the secret of my monumental decision? But as I walked through their front door, a strange calm descended. I was no longer the loving, slightly dotty grandmother trying to earn her place. I was, as they had defined me, the babysitter. And I would play my part perfectly. My behavior shifted in ways that were subtle, yet absolute. I arrived at 9 o'clock, sharp, not a minute before. When Jessica was rushing out the door, she handed me a pile of Lily's laundry. "Could you possibly throw this in while she's napping, Carol? It would be a huge help." In the past, I would have done it without a second thought, along with folding the load already in the dryer. This time, I smiled pleasantly. "I'm sorry, Jessica. My focus has to be entirely on Lily today. I can't take my attention off her for household chores." Her look of surprise was fleeting but visible. During Lily's nap, instead of tidying the kitchen or prepping their dinner ingredients as I usually did, I sat in the armchair and read a book I had brought with me. When Lily awoke, we played, we read, we had our snack. My love and attention for her was undiminished, a fiercely protected island in a sea of my new resolve. At 5 o'clock to the minute, I had Lily's bag packed and my coat on. When Mark and Jessica walked in, I gave them a brief, professional summary of the day. She had a good nap, ate all her snack, and we read 3 books. No issues to report. Mark looked around the slightly messy kitchen, a question in his eyes. "Busy day, Mom?" "Very," I said with a polite smile. "Lily requires a lot of engagement." "Well, I'll see you Thursday." And I left, without the usual lingering chat, without the offer to stay a few extra minutes so they could catch their breath. This became the new pattern. I was punctual, professional, and my purview was limited strictly to childcare. The extra things I had done out of love, the mending of a favorite toy, the stocking of their fridge with a few groceries I'd picked up, the folding of a basket of laundry, all ceased. I was pleasant, I was reliable, but I was no longer the endlessly giving matriarch. I was the help. They noticed. I could see it in their confused glances, in the slightly clipped tone Jessica would use when she came home to a house that was not as tidy as she'd left it. But how could they complain? I was doing exactly what a babysitter was paid to do. Except I wasn't being paid. They were getting precisely what their words had defined, and it turned out to be far less than what my love had previously provided. A few weeks into this new arrangement, their washing machine broke. I overheard them discussing the cost of a new one in hushed, stressed tones. It was a significant, unexpected expense. The old Carol, the one who had secretly paid off their debts, would have immediately gone to her lawyer and arranged for another anonymous miracle, a surprise rebate, a forgotten warranty payout. The new Carol, sitting in the living room reading a picture book to Lily, felt a pang of that old instinct. The desire to smooth their path, to ease their burdens, was deeply ingrained. But I resisted. When Mark mentioned the broken machine to me directly, sighing about the terrible timing, I simply looked up from the book and said, "Oh, that's a shame. Those appliances always seem to break at the worst possible moment, don't they?" I offered my sympathy, nothing more. I was just the babysitter after all. And babysitters don't buy washing machines. In the quiet of my own home, my evenings were no longer spent wondering how to better help my children. They were spent on the phone with Arthur, my lawyer, and with a small team of consultants, planning the launch of the David M. Foundation. I was researching grant-making processes, building a website, drafting our mission statement. I was creating a legacy that would echo with purpose, a legacy that would validate the love and sacrifice of so many unsung grandparents. I was taking the love my son and his wife had deemed a mere convenience and transforming it into a powerful, tangible force for good. They had no idea that while they were struggling with a broken appliance, I was moving mountains. The months that followed were a study in quiet transformation, both for me and for the foundation that now bore my husband David's name. My life, which had previously revolved around the predictable rhythm of my daughter Lily's needs on my designated babysitting days, was now filled with a new, invigorating purpose. My evenings were spent not in lonely silence, but in energizing video calls with my small, newly appointed board of directors, a retired family court judge, a compassionate financial planner, and Arthur, my lawyer. Together, we were building the David M. Foundation for generational care from the ground up. We drafted grant applications, designed a simple but elegant website, and began reaching out to community support groups to find the first wave of grandparents who would benefit from our mission. My relationship with Mark and Jessica, meanwhile, settled into a strange, coolly polite new normal. My transformation into the perfect professional babysitter was complete. I arrived on the dot, left on the dot, and performed my duties with a pleasant efficiency that offered them no room for complaint, yet provided none of the old warm comfort they had so clearly taken for granted. They seemed perpetually off balance around me, confused by the subtle withdrawal of my emotional investment. They knew something had shifted, but they were so wrapped up in their own busy lives that they lacked the curiosity, or perhaps the courage, to truly investigate it. They were getting the free childcare they needed, and for them, that seemed to be enough. They had no idea that while I was reading Goodnight Moon to their daughter, my mind was finalizing the details of a 5-figure grant that would allow another grandmother across the state to afford a safer car to transport her own grandchild. The foundation launched quietly, with a simple press release sent to local papers and online philanthropy journals. We weren't seeking fanfare, only to reach the people who needed us. But the story of a foundation dedicated to supporting grandparent caregivers, a demographic so often overlooked, was unique. A writer from a prominent statewide magazine picked it up. She was fascinated by the mission and wanted to do a feature, Peace. She interviewed me at length, and I spoke passionately about the cause, about the silent sacrifices millions of grandparents make every day. I spoke of David's belief in community, and I dedicated the foundation to his memory. The article was published a few weeks later. It was a beautiful, sensitive piece, accompanied by a professional photograph of me, looking not like a lonely widow, but like the calm, determined founder that I had become. The article mentioned the foundation's mission, its genesis, and, crucially, the substantial multi-million-dollar endowment I had provided to ensure its work would continue in perpetuity. The call came on a Saturday morning. It was Mark. His voice was a choked, strangled thing I barely recognized. "Mom," he said, his voice cracking. "Mom, we saw an article. A friend of Jessica's from work sent it to her. About a foundation." "Oh, yes?" I said calmly, sipping my morning tea. "The David M. Foundation," he continued, the words tumbling out in a rush of disbelief. "It says, Mom, it says you endowed it with your entire estate. It mentions a number. A staggering number. Is this some kind of joke?" "It's not a joke, Mark," I said. "It's my legacy. It's what I've chosen. To do with my money and your father's." There was a moment of stunned silence, and then Jessica's voice cut in, frantic and sharp. He must have put her on speakerphone. "Your money, Carol, that's our money. That's Lily's inheritance. That's the money you were supposed to leave to your family. How could you? How could you just give it all away to strangers?" The raw, unfiltered sense of entitlement in her voice was breathtaking. It was the sound of someone watching a winning lottery ticket burn right before their eyes. "I didn't give it to strangers, Jessica," I replied, my voice remaining level, cutting through her hysteria. "I gave it to my family, to a family of people who understand the value of love and sacrifice, who show up every day without expectation of reward. A family of people who would never, ever consider the person caring for their child just the babysitter." The silence that followed was electric. I had finally said it. I'd finally shown them the missing piece of the puzzle, the key that unlocked the reason for my quiet, steady withdrawal. "What?" Mark's voice was a whisper. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the conversation you had with your wife 3 months ago, Mark. The one I overheard on the baby monitor. The one where you decided I was a lonely old woman, that I was lucky you let me help because it gave me something to do. You defined my role. You told me my love was a convenience. You taught me that my presence in your life was transactional. So, I have finally learned to transact." I let the words land, letting them feel the full weight of their careless, cutting remarks. "You want to talk about family money?" I continued, my voice gaining a strength I didn't know I had. "Let me tell you about family money. Do you remember last year when you were about to lose this house? When your consulting work dried up and you suddenly received a massive, unexpected payout from your old firm for a contract dispute? Was that a miracle, Mark? Or was that a quiet, anonymous gift from a mother who couldn't bear to see her granddaughter's life upended? That was a gift from family. To family. An act of love." The silence on the other end was absolute, broken only by a small, choked sob from Jessica. "I set up that trust for Lily with the very same love," I went on. "A gift from a grandmother to her precious grandchild. But an inheritance, my dears, is the ultimate gift of family. It is a testament to a lifetime of shared love and mutual respect. And you made it abundantly clear that you do not respect me, my time, or my love. You see me as help. So I have taken the assets that you already considered yours, and I have redirected them to help others who are treated the same way. Mom, we We didn't mean it like that, Mark stammered, his voice cracking. It was just, we were stressed. We were tired. I'm sure you were, I said, and for the first time, I allowed a note of ice to enter my voice. But our true selves are revealed not when life is easy, but when we are tired and stressed. And you revealed to me who you truly believe. I am. I have simply chosen to believe you. But Lily, Jessica whispered, her voice thick with tears. What about Lily? You've stolen her future. I have stolen nothing, I corrected her. Lily will always have my love. My time, my affection, my stories, those are her birthright. But my money is not. That is my legacy, to be bestowed where I see fit. And I see fit to bestow it upon hundreds of children like Lily, whose caregivers will now have the resources they need because of this foundation. Lily's future will be fine. She has 2 educated, employed parents. She will not want for anything. You have made sure of that. The call ended soon after. There was nothing left to say. The truth, in all its devastating clarity, had been laid bare. They were not evil people. They were just careless, wrapped up in their own lives, blinded by an entitlement they never even knew they possessed. They had taken the purest thing in, their world, my unconditional love, and put a price tag on it, deeming it worth little more than a standard babysitting fee. And they had just been handed the bill for their miscalculation. I hung up the phone and looked out my window. I felt no triumph, no smug satisfaction, just a vast, aching sadness for the relationship that had been lost, and a quiet, unshakable peace in the one I was now building. My new family, the family of the David M. Foundation, was waiting, and not a single one of them would ever make me feel lucky just to help.